snare. All
Yeah.
right. We could talk about all these things throughout this
Yeah.
this hang. Um, so I'm very pumped you're doing a show on Thursday. We want to talk about that for sure. But I always start these conversations a little bit like pretty broadly, but kind of at the beginning. Like um I know you, we met at Soci several years ago.
Yeah.
And then we got to hang at Soci again this summer when you came back to teach, which was pretty exciting. So I know a little bit about your background, but start us off. What has your path been to like how did you discover music and get excited about it and kind of wind your way to sitting in a woman cave with a couple of snare drums?
Well, I actually feel like it all started here.
Yeah, perfect.
That was
Yeah.
always this was always my state. No, I did grow up with a lot of music around. I grew up in LA.
It's about you.
Yeah, we have that in common. And my father was a film musician, he played French horn, so I grew up in that world of like movie music and stuff, and it was super fun to be around. So that's probably you know, the initial interesting kind of
Like, did you get
part
to
of
be
my.
around sessions and stuff? Like he would
Yeah,
have
a
like,
little bit.
yeah,
Yeah. No, he definitely was like bring your kids to work vibes. So
yeah,
we would yeah, we went to a few sessions, hang out in rehearsals, everything. Yeah, he definitely had us around, my
yeah.
brother and I. So we're around that a lot. And then
I
my
remember
mom,
that I met your dad before I met you, I believe.
oh yeah,
And
true.
this really awesome. And I think of this being a dad now, like trying
Yeah.
to. He was like had such a cool vibe. I was like, my daughter's going out to your summer institute. She's excited. Like, oh, how cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, yeah, so just a lot of music at home. My brother also, he played guitar, so we were kind of like a rock band, kind of sibling relationship where, I mean, we didn't have a rock band, but it was like we'd get together in this little studio room we had, and like just jam and play. So I started out just playing drum set for a long while, and I'm actually really happy, because it's like it could have gone a few different ways, but I'm really grateful that my first years were just like not that serious, It was really
Yeah,
fun.
yeah,
I think to this day that kind of reflects in a lot of my values and what I want to be around.
totally.
Um,
I'm gonna pause you a couple times along the way because this is
yeah.
I'm feeling like, oh wow, we have such a similar story. But
Yeah.
like for me, that was like, um, yeah, I had my drum set and my brother played guitar too. And so we had kind
Really?
of like faux rock band, we would like
Yeah.
he learned like Wipeout or Johnny Be Good when we were in elementary school, like do the thing or whatever. But then like my moment in the 80s was, like Bon Jovi and Run DMC, or like,
Yeah.
like I'm imagining possibly like a different
I mean, us, it was like,
like a lot of
yeah,
hair bands and
I was like Nirvana going into like White Stripes and
right.
those,
Right. So maybe we overlapped on Nirvana for a
for like
moment.
a little moment. Yeah,
Yeah, White
exactly.
Stripes. Yeah. That's awesome. That's great. So
Yeah.
and you had your drum set in your room and you were like learning those beats and playing along with
Yeah,
those.
that was just kind of playing along to stuff, and that
Yeah.
was that for a long time. And then I guess as like a teenager, I felt a little bit more stoked about the idea of doing kind of like what my dad was doing. So I felt like, all right, I want to get the orchestral training. I want to feel like I can actually do the full percussion thing. So I joined a youth orchestra in LA, the Cal State Northridge Youth Orchestra.
Yeah. CISA.
um,
Oh,
and learned how to play timpani actually first, and then kind of started to add on the other instruments. One of my early percussion teachers in LA actually was Don Williams, who's the brother of John Williams, the
oh,
composer.
wow, no way.
And he was awesome, just kind of like old school studio player, but
Mm.
who loved jazz. And kind of, yeah, our lessons were always fun and all over the place.
Awesome.
And then after, huh, sorry, you're.
Awesome. Yeah.
Oh. And yeah, and at that point, I spent a summer at the Interlochen summer camp and really enjoyed it. And they were like, "You should audition for the high school." And so I auditioned and I got in. So I went to the arts academy for a few years, and then went on to Manhattan School of Music. So that was just kind of the like
Yeah.
formational, getting serious about.
So like a few years of high school, you were like not the summer camp at like you did the summer camp at Interlochen and it was like, wow, you're awesome. You should apply kind of thing. And so you did like the go there,
Go there, yeah.
the boarding school, like the thing,
Yeah, yeah.
go deep.
That was fun. I mean, it was cool
Yeah.
because it was definitely really serious, but at
Yeah.
the same time, that's what I wanted to do at that time. I just wanted to practice and like learn how to play marimba solos.
That's
No,
amazing. Was Keith Alea, was he there? Was it?
no,
No,
Keith wasn't there yet.
that wasn't a thing. Yeah.
But though Keith did teach some private lessons I had in the summer. So
Awesome. Right. So he was right. I knew he was involved, but he was a summer
yeah.
involved in it. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it
So
was John
cool.
Alfieri at the time. And it
Yeah.
was just cool because it was just a real nice spirit of like collaboration, and starting to get a feel for creative projects and, putting together recitals. And yeah, so I was happy to be there. And
It's amazing.
yeah, so those are the early years.
Yeah. And then that led you to Manhattan. It's funny. And I went to Eastman, same like West Coast,
Yeah.
East Coast thing. Though Rochester and Manhattan are very different places.
Maybe they have something more things in common than
Maybe, yeah.
because,
Cold.
yeah, actually my father went to Eastman, so there's another connection.
Okay, nice.
But
So there were a ton of interlocking. I feel
yeah.
like of the 4 percussionists that went in my year, like multiple of them either went to interlocking or summer or whatever. And it feels like there was like a cool, yeah, there was a cool crew around that scene. So
Yeah.
that brought you to Manhattan School and you started
I
playing off snare drum or you started playing
yeah.
like what was yours?
Oh
What was
yeah, I don't know. I think I was a little bit sorry, there's a gong next to me that's like resonating my voice in a weird way, so I'm gonna
love it.
muffle it. Okay. Pillow. All right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think I was a little bit under like I didn't really know what I was going into
Mm,
going to Manhattan School of Music. I don't think I really was aware how serious of an orchestral school it was, and I still was just in the mode of like I want to freelance, I want to do everything.
mm,
And my main teacher there, Eric Charleston, that's what he did. He's just a Broadway and
mm.
subbing for Phil and ballet and whatever, and great jazz player. So I actually I think that's what it was. Is I just kind of knew that following him as a teacher there was like, okay, this is a New York freelancer, so that's
Right.
what I want to do. But I didn't realize that the rest of the program was so serious about the orchestral thing that it was definitely like something I butted heads against a bit, but because I knew pretty early on that wasn't going to be my path. I knew I wanted all the like skills and all the kind of intense like building on yourself kind of energy, but I didn't want specifically to be auditioning for orchestras. So yeah, so it was a little bit weird, but then at the same time I think that it was the perfect thing at that time to learn so soon what I didn't want. Like I feel like a lot
Yeah.
of people don't realize that it's kind of a blessing in disguise to learn what you don't want and then choose a direction a little bit soon, or at least just close the door. Like closing a door, it doesn't have to. But what's the whole like you close the door and other one's open? Like it's
Yeah, totally.
I closed the door early and
Yeah.
the other doors opened early, so I
Right.
have no regrets about that. But yeah, and I did surround myself around like composers in that program, and there's the contemporary music program they have that I just kind of felt like I was doing a lot of that stuff even though I wasn't doing that program.
Right.
Yeah, and then
From then to now, like I like when you say freelance, but I guess I think of you as a freelance player. But when I think of you like playing drums in your band. I think of you, yeah, like playing with International Contemporary Ensemble. And so definitely, I guess there's something like imagining you in a lot of different places or whatever, like a freelancer for sure. And I know, like I imagine, I think of the times that we played together or like playing whatever Verez together or like whatever times you played with or this summer at Soci. But like how do you describe what you do and then the music that you write and you make, like so I think of like this very multifaceted cool fabric of a artistic life that you have. But like when somebody when you meet somebody after a show that you haven't met and they're like, oh, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like, do you have that answer, or how do you describe your own practice?
I say I'm a musician.
Yeah, good, good, good.
But at that.
Period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, actually, I think it's also, I think one of the fun things about having my hands in different places is like, depending who I'm talking to, I talk about different things, you know? So I'm totally happy talking to someone's like distant relative who doesn't know anything about music. And like last year I did a bit of Broadway subbing and I'll just be like, I play on Broadway. And
Right.
it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
that's not really true, you know?
Right.
Like
Right.
I subbed once, I enjoyed it, like I might do it again, but it's not like my full thing, you know. And then yeah, or talking to someone who's definitely in the new music scene, being like, I play with International Contemporary Ensemble and I champion new music and like
Right.
maybe not getting into talking about playing in my rock band or whatever. Like I don't know, it's kind of it's fun to discuss the layers and the crossovers when folks want to, but it's also kind of I found that it's okay to just talk about one thing at a time.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess I guess I've always thought about the different facets of what I'm doing is like these different uh like ladders that I enjoy climbing.
Mm.
So like I like climbing this ladder with my rock band, you know, like I want to keep going, seeing where it goes. So I'm just always going to be climbing up it. Well, not always, but you know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah. Yeah,
an
yeah.
active, an active
Yeah.
thing. So I'm on it and but meanwhile I'm like, you know, on some other ladder for some other thing. Let's say like I've done a few arranging projects over the years, kind of sporadically. And a couple of years ago, we put out an album with my band where like we arranged a bunch of our music for chamber orchestra and made a recording and did a live show and everything. And that was super fun. And like those, to me, that's the kind of like the image I have is like climbing, what would it be called? Translaterally or something,
Yeah, yeah.
like from one ladder to another.
Right.
Um,
You got
where,
catwalks between your different
yeah,
ladders.
exactly, the
Yeah.
catwalks. That's a
Yeah.
good, yeah. Because because that's like fun to be have climbed enough on both of those things.
Yeah.
If you do the catwalk between, there's something interesting there.
Right. All right. All right.
So yeah, that's kind of how I've
Yeah.
been seeing the different things. But yeah, in general, I don't know. I mean, I at the end of the day, like on paper and as far as just like existing as a human on this planet and in New York, I I do think of myself as like a working musician
Mm.
for sure. You know, like I my goal is to primarily live my life off of music,
Mm.
and that's the practical side of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's important to talk about.
Yeah.
So I take a bunch of you know gigs all over the place, and I'm happy to just play in a number of different environments. But then in there, I want to make sure that like a majority of that work is stuff that I'm enjoying or has some kind of cool, you know, creative outcome or something like that, you know? So that's kind of where those two things meet. It's just like trying to mostly have my life be playing music and have that for the most part paying the bills, and then make the majority of that enjoyable or creatively fulfilling or socially fulfilling or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Try to
When
have
there's
those convert.
is it right that like of the it's like when you say working musician, there's such a cool, like that's an awesome it feels like an everyday, right? Like you're doing something
Yeah,
every
yeah,
day. You're like a there's a craft to it and a practice to it, or like a yeah, like a for myself, I think like a workman-like approach or whatever. Like I'm gonna
yeah,
get up and I'm gonna play with somebody today and do something. But so I imagine the fulfillment, like there's the paying the bills, and then there's like the music that you're really passionate, but then there's also just that the joy of playing with other people.
yeah,
And so sometimes, like I know for myself, right? Like sometimes maybe you're not loving the music that you're playing, but you're loving the people that you play with or whatever. And so
exactly.
that's like there's all that, those kind of things. Um, that's awesome. I love hearing you talk about that.
Yeah.
We could just keep talking about it, but I want to talk about what you're gonna play um next Thursday,
Yeah.
if that's cool. So like since I started this podcast, we've rebranded our series from Brooklyn Bound into So Labs, which feels really Good. And this is the first one of the fall that So is playing on. We're gonna double bill. I'm excited to play some of your music with you.
Yeah.
And so I think I know a little bit about what you're doing, but tell us, for folks who are watching, who are going to come out to 20 Grand
Yeah.
next Thursday, what's your set all about?
The set is going to be interesting. It's going to be fun.
I agree. I agree.
I'm pretty much just focusing on two projects, one that's been done for a little while and one that's brand new and kind of fun and scary. Um,
Right.
so yeah, so the which I think is kind of part of the ethos of So Labs, right?
Like
So I'm trying to dig
1,000%.
into it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, the project that's done is this piece Home Gone that I wrote for the Pathos Trio last year, and they just put out their recording of it along with some other awesome pieces. Their Pathos Trio is a group of two percussionists and piano, um, and they just have a really fun like commissioning mentality where I think they mostly want to be commissioning composers who kind of have one foot in the sort of rock electronica, that kind of world, like maybe, and in general they lean on the aesthetically more on the kind of like heavy dark side of things, I guess, as far as genres go. So folks who have some kind of foot in that door and then another foot in the classical door. And so they reached out to me because I have my own projects, writing my own kind of dark-ish ambient music, and then with my band that it's a rock band.
Mm.
And so I wrote this piece Home Gone, and the funny thing is that when they commissioned me, I really felt like I wanted to lean into those darker vibes, but ironically I actually wrote a really poppy.
Right. A little like, when I think of the beginning of it, it's great.
Yeah.
It's like a little, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But I mean, part of it just is that was like, when you just sometimes have like an old idea that you feel like it just needs to happen. And so that, even though it's this whole piece revolves around kind of a poppiness, it's because the tune that kind of starts the whole thing off, this melody, it was kind of like a bit of a manic melody that I had in my head for a lot of the lockdown, actually.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so it was like kind of happy and cool, but the way it would happen is it would kind of like appear in my head, and then it would cycle and change and get these like weird layers, and it
Mm.
would like it itself would kind of go a bit crazy. And
And it
so
would come back. You mean daily? Like it's something that would come back over time. You would be
yeah,
thinking
no,
about.
it would just kind of come back sort of honestly like how I think the piece sounds now, where it would be like the melody starts and then it repeats and then it goes through some kind of almost like theme and variations thing, but it just gets more and more chaotic.
Mm.
And yeah, so that's kind of the premise of the piece, is that like it starts with this familiarity, but it kind of gets distorted halfway through. And the way I I made that distortion happen is just by having the group record themselves playing the second half of the piece.
Mm.
And so we play that recording live, but then they don't play that material. They kind of start on that material, and then live you start to develop that material into what I've been calling ecstatic static,
I
because
love
it's
it.
kind of
Yeah.
the white noise thing, like this building of big white noise. But it's supposed to have a sort of a lightness still, it's kind of like coming out of that confusion. So yeah, so it kind of just starts out as a pop tune, and then it gets a little bit weird, and then it comes out with hopefully just some people on stage playing a lot of noise, but in a cool way. So
I'm in. I mean,
yeah,
I am,
you're
but I,
literally
I love that
in.
description. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you, so Felix is a Soci alum. You all weren't there together.
No, Felix just kind of has this
Yeah.
way of like reaching out to everyone and
Yeah.
finding ways to connect. So no, we never connected in that way. His other bandmate, Marcelina, is an old friend of mine, and we went to
Sure.
MSN together. So
Yeah. From percussion quartet
from our
days.
percussion set days, yeah.
Yeah, Pathos. I got a chance. We have a Brooklyn Bound about with all three of them. I think I got to talk to. So folks can check out that.
Yeah.
I think during the pandemic, they shared some work, some video stuff that they were doing, which is great.
Cool.
Yeah, so very psyched that they're involved.
Yeah. So
Um,
that's gonna be fun to
yeah,
play with a version of Pathos with you and me joining it.
yeah, love it.
That'll be cool. And then the other piece that is the kind of exciting new fresh experiment is it's a piece that I think I'm now starting to call it by its official name, which it's called Rolls. And I've been informally talking about it as a click track experiment, because that's exactly what it is. And it's a piece that I'm curious to see just how it grows over time, because I think it'll be pretty flexible as far as like instrumentation and number of people and stuff like that. But for now, it's for 5 folks, mostly percussion, but there's some keyboard stuff in there. And my writing process for the piece has been to write it exclusively via click track and via like audio, just me telling the player what to do or how to think about the music that's happening. Um, so it's a little bit of like Paulina Oliveros prompts based, but it's still synchronized.
Mm.
And it's actually been a really fun challenge because I mean, I did a little bit of sketching out and stuff, but for the most part, it's just kind of, I enjoy working in Ableton, so it works out for me, but it's like being in Ableton and just, speaking for duration, saying, now build this section, from this dynamic to this dynamic over the course of this amount of time. And seeing the amount of time it takes for me to say that,
Right,
how the player will process it and how much time, how that kind of affects the music happening. So,
right, right.
yeah, so it's been kind of a head trip, but in a fun way.
Mm.
And
And you say click track because like, so I haven't opened my MP3 yet.
hmm,
My
so it's
roles
exciting.
MP3.
Yeah.
So spoiler.
Yeah.
But click track in terms of like, there a metronome kind of click track along with descriptors and instructions. So the prompts, the Pauline Oliveira style prompts could be either that felt like a very practical prompt, or
Yeah.
something musical or whatever. But there'll be pulse there that will help us synchronize.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
So
Yeah.
it's the combination. And I think that's where I could have a lot more fun with it moving forward, is being a little bit weirder with the click track itself. But there are some breaks and tempo shifts, and some players are encouraged to go against it at times and
Mm.
stuff like that. So
Against the click or against the
the
prompt
click.
or all the above?
The
Against the click.
click, the click, to a certain degree, the prompt too, but yeah, the
Yeah.
click. I mean, one of the fun things that I realized while developing it is that it just really had this kind of theatrical tone to it, where I felt like the idea of developing like characters was came quick, like pretty soon in the process, because uh yeah, when you don't have any music on the page, and I think to find interesting ways for musicians to interact with each other, without just writing the music as such, you kind of have to create certain like dynamics. So if you wanted to write, like one player is playing a consistent rhythm and then the other player maybe is going to be phasing and kind of like stretching in and out of it,
Mm.
on paper I could just write it as such and that's it.
Right.
But when you're doing it through prompts, it's, of course, then again, you can just tell them what to do and that's fine. But I started to realize that it kind of lent itself well to characters. So like, for example, that character in this piece I'm calling the destroyer, because their whole motive is to kind of like mess with what's happening
Right.
and
Right.
kind of,
Right.
yeah, do that sort of thing. And then there's like a friend in it, and the friend is supposed to always be like supporting stuff, which is kind of something that happens in composition and music
Sure.
also, so yeah, so that's been the idea behind it, and I've developed a sort of a proto version of it that's 11 minutes long, and we'll see how it goes. I think it's going to be a little bit crazy, like it's like I think about it sometimes, I'm like, this sounds really weird. But it's good to try it out and see how it goes.
That's awesome. So I see the role now. Now I'm understanding the roles. The
Yeah.
change of title. That makes a lot of sense. And it's like interesting. I'm like, so is very much in a headspace right now about like how we've always learned music in not just one way, but like, of course, I think in our commissioning, there's been a lot of um, traditional Western music notation ideas, right? Like written down in a way like we're all um, fluent in that in that form of language or whatever, in that communication. So it's used a lot. But of course, like we've done a lot of things that aren't that. But I
Yeah.
feel like in the last, I don't know, some amount of time, like this whole year, like all of our rehearsals are like videoed because there's like nothing written down, and right. So you're
Yeah.
in a different way. But even in that different way, there's very specific pitches that are being taught by rote versus big ideas that are taught by discussion versus, you know, improv prompts that get people places, you know. And I think like it's interesting because I'm thinking, so Eric wrote a piece for us back in the day that used this idea, though I wouldn't call it click track because there was no pulse,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it was, I guess we called it MP3 piece or something.
Nice. Nice.
Because this was like this was long enough ago. It was like we had these little like, you
Little
know, odd
MP3s.
shuffle kind of things. Yeah, you know, it's like, um, and he would change it up every show.
Oh, cool.
Like it had the same place in the show, like, you know, it would happen each night or whatever, but the prompts would get different. And
Love
it
that.
was a bit like wild, you know, like all of a sudden you were standing up, you were like, you know, if I had been at the drum set, all of a sudden, you know, it was like walk to the other side of the stage and, you know, make it was like, you know, prompting some more like kind of chaotic, crazy sounds or whatever, you
Yeah.
know.
It's funny how
I
it,
was just thinking, do you know you maybe I don't know, Cenk Ergun, do you know the composer? My good
yeah, yeah.
Cenk, he's wonderful. And he started to do some stuff with just intonation.
Mm,
And so he's been writing for like singers or wind players, like a trombone player and a singer, I think, or trombone choir and a singer or something. But the it's not a click track again. There's no pulse, but it's they're
there is.
listening to something, but they're listening to the pitches and tuning to those pitches.
Ooh,
Um,
cool.
for folks who like aren't, you know, maybe like International Contemporary Ensemble or like Jack or something, who are very like, you know, used to picking out just intonation
Yeah.
pitches. So it's really cool that it almost
Good.
feels like slowly there's a like, right, a composer can pass on ideas in a lot of different ways. And
Yeah.
the way is this kind of real time, um, yeah, real time passing on of prompts and stuff.
Yeah. And it's
Yours
funny.
feels very different. For the record, I like it feels very different than either of these ideas, but just in the same world or something,
Well, I
you
was
know?
going to say something that maybe they share in common is like it's pretty performer centric, I think, where like
Mm,
you're really thinking about the performer experience.
mm,
Um, because that's been my experience with that kind of, click track or audio reactive based
right.
uh, pieces. Like I really like the combination of structure and freedom that it gives, that you're living inside this thing, it's telling you what to do, but at the same time, your eyes are free from the page and you're
Mm.
maybe looking around at the other players a little more and stuff like that. So it's a different, yeah, I think that's like the part that appeals most to me and maybe appeals to other folks using similar medium, is that it gives a little bit of freedom, but not total freedom, which can also
Yeah, yeah,
be
yeah,
frightening.
yeah. And
Yeah.
comfort, I feel like, you know,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah, you're like some part of what you're doing is taken care of so that you can spend more energy elsewhere. So like you said, looking or yeah, that's really cool. That's
Huh.
really, really cool.
Yeah.
Um, and are you gonna play anything solo on the night, or are we gonna hear these two things of yours?
We'll see. I might. I'm kind of on the fence.
Keep it fresh,
Um,
keep it, yeah,
yeah.
keep it
We'll
flexible.
see. Play it
We
by
want to hear more
ear.
Clara. We want to hear more
I
Clara.
know. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I'm a little bit just trying, like, wrapping my head around, technical logistics and
Yeah,
wanting to keep my head on top of my shoulders.
yeah, yeah.
But
Well, I loved your solo set. During solo set, you played
thanks.
a solo set. It was very beautiful, and
Okay, all right. If that's a request, we'll see.
I would
I'll
always welcome that
yeah.
vibe.
Thanks.
But I
Thanks.
really appreciate how kind of open and experimental you're approaching your Solab set, because I think that is I mean anybody we would invite to play or who does a Solab or whatever, you know, is like totally open to do anything that they want to do, but it's called a laboratory with that idea of like, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe we're going to approach it a little differently than if you had a gig at whatever, LPR or something.
Yeah, totally. And I appreciate it as well. I think that we should have more spaces like this in our music community because it requires a certain, yeah, like boldness on both sides, both for folks giving a stage for it and also for folks being okay
Right.
taking it,
Yeah, risk taking. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it's obviously it's like even as I've been developing this idea, I'm just like, oh, I want to work on this for another year. I want to think through some of the logistics better. I want to do this. I want to do that. It's like,
Mm,
of course, you have those feelings, but it's I think at that point it would maybe never really get started. So it's nice to try things and get feedback, of course, and
totally.
yeah, go
Yeah.
from there.
One thing we talk about with Soul Labs, and I wonder if you've had this experience, because I can't tell when we first started playing in New York, it felt like there were a lot of spaces to try things out.
Mm.
When I think of some of the things we tried out in front of people, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
almost embarrassing. It's like we did that in front of people. You know what I mean? Like some real
Yeah.
real clunkers, some risk that paid off and some risk that were like, okay, we learned a lot there, but
Yeah.
like, I don't know, like, it used to feel like maybe, some of these spaces, like,
Mm.
I don't know, LPR didn't used to feel like as, kind of, finished producty as
Yeah.
maybe it does for me now.
Yeah.
Uh, the Stone used to exist more in a space of like, it felt more, it's always risk taking for sure, but felt more like, I don't know, now it's in an institution, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like some
True. Yeah.
a certain successfulness of that, but
Yeah. Also,
um
I don't know about you, but I feel like these days a lot of experimentation that's happening, it's like, I don't know how to explain this, but it's like someone's practice itself will be experimental.
mm,
Like, oh, I explore making these kinds of sounds with my voice with someone else. And so it is by nature experimental,
sure.
but it's also something they can kind of travel the world and tour with. And
Mm,
it's kind of like a thing that you can kind of just plop somewhere. And
right, right,
so
right,
not to say it's not any less or more experimental than
right.
anything else, but it is like a different. It's why I've always had a hard time with the term like experimentalism, and because it's so
Experiment.
broad.
Yeah.
Because I do think
That's what
that,
I love about it, but I think you're totally right. Yeah.
yeah, no, I know. I mean, it's great. It's great.
Yeah,
It's just it's so broad that sometimes when you're talking to someone using the same words or terms, I feel like we're just not talking about the same.
totally. Yeah, yeah,
And I kind of wish we had a little bit more
yeah,
terminology, or maybe I don't. Maybe it's good it
yeah.
doesn't. But
But so like meaning like if the practice itself is kind of experiment, it's less like maybe what you're talking about with the way you're using the Soul Labs or the way maybe So oftentimes talks about these, it's like this is the first iteration that you're gonna build on, but it's
yeah,
like this is like you're trying something that you're gonna continually build on.
yeah,
As opposed to every moment is experimental and that's going to happen in these different spaces or whatever.
yeah, right, yeah. And like I think about it, one of the things that comes up often for me is uh let's just say the concept of like tonalism in general in like improvisation spaces. Like improvisation is improvisation, and there's a whole spectrum of, you know, complete freedom and experimentation. And on the other end, it's like you could be experimenting and the Star Spangled Banner comes out, and
Right.
but that in many spaces that wouldn't fit you
Right.
know the realm of experimentation that folks are doing.
Mm,
And so it's yeah, it's kind of that conversation too of just how broad can a space be?
mm,
Can it pick up from existing things, or does it have to be completely new each time?
right.
Yeah, I don't know. All of this is
Mm.
definitely interesting to me these days.
Well, do you feel, I guess maybe one of my questions was going to be like, in some ways, the fact that So knows less spaces in New York to experiment, and so we kind of made our own space to experiment. That could be two things. One, that there are less experimental spaces in New York, but two, that I think like those spaces have moved a little bit, right? Like as we've gotten older or whatever, and like like it feels to me maybe there are still spaces, and I'm not sure if it like it used to be in Williamsburg and now it's in Bushwick, or now it used to be in Bushwick and now it's in wherever else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like are there less spaces actually that are because of things like things are so expensive, dot, 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 it's harder to be experimental or.
Wonder if what it is, and I have to move to my charger while I answer this question, but
Perfect.
I
I
think
love
I
this.
wonder if what it is
That's on tour.
yeah.
Here's a
Is
charger. I have one right here, Clara. I got it right
Oh,
here.
thanks. Could you pass it through the
Yeah.
um I think that part of it is also actually not just space, but time.
Right. Yeah. Right. Interesting.
So yeah, so I think that there are the spaces, but different spaces lend themselves to different like timelines, I guess, you know? So sort of like what I was thinking, like I think there's a lot of experimenting that happens in my band, but we don't play in experimental music spaces. We play in rock venues.
Hmm.
But we do, the experimenting happens in our home, you know, like that's the space where it happens. Some people, the experimenting happens in the space of a residency, you know, a creative residency is like you guys have done a ton of, I'm sure. And some people, it takes place in the moment in a space, you know, a concert space that devotes itself to that. And I think what you guys are doing is some kind of intermediary of, it is stuff that can be, you know, worked on in many other environments leading up to it, but still the space itself is still encouraging of like non-finished products, I guess, and kind of, you know, a general spirit of trying stuff out. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, that all makes sense. The time component makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I haven't done one of these conversations in a long time. So I used to have a couple questions that I always wrapped up with.
Okay, cool.
I feel like with you, we just moved from the orange drums and pink piccolo snare drum, but I wonder if you can tell me the last time you played those orange drums and pink piccolo snare drum, what the band, has your band played recently? Has there been band rehearsal? Have you been practicing soft snare drum roll on a pink piccolo snare drum? What's your vibe been with those instruments?
Just morning soft snare drum rolls on the piccolo snare drum. Yeah, every morning.
Every morning.
No, that would be a cool practice.
That'd be something.
No, unfortunately, that's just a emotional relic, and I don't play it as often as I should. But no, but as far as the orange drums and just the drums in general, yeah, my band. I don't think I mentioned the name yet. My band, Infinity Shred. It's a trio: guitar, synths, and drums. We had a fun show in September, and right now we're sort of in the process of wrapping up well, we haven't announced it yet, but it's okay. I can give a little sneak peek here. That
Breaking news, Clara.
Breaking news. we did do a fun, slightly nostalgic project of re-recording an album from 10 years ago. So it's going to be an anniversary album. So it'll be a double release of the original and this live version that we recorded in a church upstate. So it's just nice to do like a fully live performance of it. It's awesome. Wow. A lot of the songs that we'll play live in shows are from that album, and they've morphed a lot over time, and they just don't sound the same way as they did originally. So that was part of the idea behind it, and that was really fun. And we shot a lot of nice video, and we're gonna just do a whole kind of sharing of that project this year or this coming year. So that's that. But to be honest, I think we all are also very much itching to make new music. So that's, I think, the next step. And not to be on a downer note, but I do feel like that's been hard these days. You know, I feel like we could have a whole other podcast about that, but making time
to make new things.
Time to make new things. Yeah. So that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. Okay. That'll be part 2.
Yeah.
It will be a part 2. That's perfect. That's cool. I like that idea. We've thought about that. I've thought about that with like the first album I put out of my stuff, Amid the Noise. Like it lives on the album in a certain way, and I really love that. But it's really transformed into a different thing when we play it live. Yeah. And we've thought about that too. What's the right way to do that? And I can't wait to hear yours.
You should do it. I think also just it's fun to work with a space that does something cool to it, you know, and really having it sound live. I think
you all sound awesome in a church. That'll be epic.
Yeah, it's really fitting. It works really well. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, officially last question then, because a lot of this I guess the video portion of this podcast definitely started during the pandemic, but before it's hilarious. It was like, ooh, it was like these phone calls. Like I got this app that was like a journal, like I think journalists use to record conversations, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah,
It was like
yeah.
very just a phone thing, you know. And um, but then it happened when we weren't playing shows, you know, and now luckily for a while we have been, though it's in a wildness. But the last question was always a little bit about you know, the memories of fun shows we had in the past. Oftentimes I would say, and I still feel like this is true, the more so like when we get together, there's just it so often the same stories come up, right? Because they're like the comment, right? It's like, oh, that time that dot 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 happened. And then the more we tour, the more we have those stories. Um, and you know, as a percussion group, well, you have an epic story. I was gonna say, as a percussion group, sometimes it's like the breaking of the instrument on the
Oh
stage.
yeah.
Like the most epic story of that at Soci, the breaking of the glass bottle. Um, but do you like when you think of your, and I this could be with your band or as, you know, as a freelancer or as a composer or as a soloist or whatever it is, some kind of very memorable performing experience to share. And that could be very a very meaningful and awesome show or a kind of, you know, epic fail.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I always love being on the spot and seeing what comes up, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I thought of one thing immediately when you said that, and then I thought about a bunch of others, you know, and I'm like, oh, and that first time I did this and working with that composer, and like everyone I think has some epic moments to, well, not, I mean, I'm happy that there have been a few really, really special moments so far
Yeah.
in my life. So those definitely all like flash up, like I'm about to die, you know, last images. There's these things, you know, it's amazing. But I will say the first thing that came up was it was a show that I played with my band. We were on this long tour. It was the longest tour that we had played, had done because it was a 6 week long tour opening for like this band called Periphery. They're like a metal band. It's like, it was felt, honestly, to me, it was like very jarring in many ways because I like, we really went right into this whole culture and everything of just doing a long tour like that. Um, and yeah, so we played a bunch of shows, and this one I think was somewhere in Florida, maybe in Tampa or something like that. I guess all there is to it is that when the second band was playing, I got to stage dive for the first time.
Yes.
And that wasn't, it was after we had already played, so it's not really like during our show, you know, but it's like for me that felt like a big marker, you know, like okay, finally I've actually done a proper stage dive from stage
I,
at a metal show.
I've never had this experience.
That's what
So
I'm saying. It felt like a bucket list thing.
you were caught.
I was caught. I was caught. I didn't fall.
Yeah, this or
Like,
this
I
or
don't even remember. I feel like
yeah.
I kind of just like did a torpedo kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that just felt like okay, now I finally crossed over into like this end of the spectrum.
Yeah,
And
more legit touring metal situation.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's
So
amazing.
I came out of that, you know, a new person, a new me.
All right. Well, believe it or not, at a Soul Percussion show thus far, there's never been a stage dive. I know it's probably unbelievable,
For real? That's
but yeah,
crazy.
I know it's crazy, right? We haven't had that experience yet.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Maybe it's coming, you know, it just,
It's
yeah,
definitely coming.
just have to
Yeah.
play at the right venue and, you know,
Yeah. Maybe out of Soul Labs, we'll
yeah,
figure
so
it
it's
out.
like a little more haze and stuff, just so
Yeah.
people get, you know,
And a little more stage, maybe.
more
That's part of
stage,
it.
more haze.
Yeah, more stage, more haze. Awesome. Well done, Clara. That was a good one. That was a good one. That has
Well,
never been shared, I think, on a Brooklyn Bound podcast.
good. I'm glad. I'm
Love it
glad.
so much. Well, I'm looking forward to next week. I'm looking forward to
Yeah,
playing your music and hearing your music and hanging out and all the things.
same.
Um, so the show is October 26th. It's at 7:30, we discovered, which I'm very happy about.
Yep.
So come on out. We are at 20 Grand Avenue. There will be signs. You can buzz 205. That's the scene. Clara, it's nice to catch up like this.
It's been great. Thanks so
Yeah,
much, Jason.
absolutely. Thanks for making time for this. I will see you next week.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
All right.
Bye.
I
Bye, everyone.